Man of Steel has so many problems, but the one above all is that, like the title suggests, this movie isn't really about Superman. It's about the metal, awesome idea of a Man of Steel, which is great, but that's not the point of Superman. Now, if you're a defender of this movie and the Zack Snyderverse in general, the first thing you're probably going to bring up is the fact that a superhero movie doesn't have to be comic accurate to be good. And hey, I fully agree. So I'm not going to spend this video talking about the comics or other interpretations. I'm going to talk about why Man of Steel failed on its own merits. The film starts off with a 20-minute scene about Krypton and Clark's parents, which is already kind of boring. But because it's action-packed, it's not bad, and even though Clark's blood parents aren't going to be in the rest of the Snyderverse, characterizing Zod so much before Clark even meets him is a positive thing. Although I'm not a fan of so many different shots of Clark's penis, actually, there's a lot of penis theming, and this opening drags on at least twice as long as it should, I understand Snyder wanting to start his universe here. Hey, good job so far. Don't worry, we're getting there. The biggest reason the opening doesn't work by far is that Cal doesn't even see any of it. He gets the cliff notes later on from Jor-El, but having so much of the beginning go completely unobserved by anyone but Zod is a bit ridiculous. And then the choices that Cal's parents make and what they want for him are technically conveyed to him later by Jor-El, thus making this scene redundant in a film over 2 hours long. However, I like that the immediate follow-up to this scene is one where Clark saves a bunch of guys on an oil rig in the somewhat present day. But then we're immediately following a flashback where Clark's experimenting with his powers. And if you can't already tell, all 4 of Cal's parents collectively get more screen time and dialogue in a film that's focused on him. And we spend so much time in the past that it leaves no room for what happens later, namely Clark's relationship with Lois, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. Again, I have to compliment the care with which Ma Kent talks to Clark and helps him adjust to his powers. It doesn't really make sense, seeing as Clark would have had to make these adjustments as soon as he develop consciousness, but that's fine. After this scene, we're given another gray and boring moment where Clark steals a perfectly innocent family's clothes. Now again, I have to not reference the comics, so sure, this Superman might do that. But at the same time, he's still unaffected by cold temperatures, so I feel like he could have at least taken the wet ones that clearly no one was using. And then we immediately jump into another flashback where we see the ginger population's worst member bully Clark, and then Clark saves a bus full of his classmates, including his bully. The problem with yet another flashback sequence is that you're kind of just jerking the audience around the timeline of the film, and each flashback doesn't really accomplish what it's trying to. Like, you get a prompt 12 seconds with Clark's classmates, and the most remarkable thing about them is that one of them has red hair. Not only that, but then we get Pa Kent's first scene, and he tells Clark not to save a bus full of children when they need help. So the flashback is trying to establish Clark's inherently good nature while also beginning to springboard another enormous problem with the film, the Jesus metaphors. Now, no comic talk, this is stupid. Not because you can't make an allegory about Christ through Superman, but that you can't beat it over the heads of the audience and still call it a superhero film, especially when this version of Superman is such a wrathful murderer, but we'll get to that later. Besides, I don't know much about Jesus, so this isn't for me to criticize. Now that the film's back in the present, it starts to speed up the origin story because we're well over a half hour in and there's no suit, no flying, no nothing. And Clark and Lois finally meet in an offhand scene. Now, not only is there no chemistry, not only did Clark just kind of appear here despite the fact that he can't fly, I guess he walked or something, which sure, whatever. But Lois makes a super annoying reporter. Now, for all I don't know about Jesus, I know a thing or two about reporting, and Lois Lane is not a good example of one in this film. She finds Clark on his way to the Kryptonian ship, which I don't even know how he knew where it was, and that kickstarts their relationship, specifically when he lasers a wound in her stomach. We actually spend quite a bit of time in this ship, like almost as much time as we spent on Krypton, and Cal's robot daddy exposits for half of that, telling Cal and the audience a bunch of stuff we've known since the beginning, again making the entire beginning unnecessary. And finally, after all that bunk, Clark donned his suit for the first time, and yes, we get potentially the only good scene in this movie. I know diehard supporters of this film like to glaze this scene, and hey, I won't stop you. This is probably where you'll notice the score kicking in, and for all this movie's faults, the score is actually very good, as per usual in bad superhero movies. So Cal finally gains the confidence to test himself and to soar through the sky, while Lois backtracks through everywhere he's been so far in the movie's only example of a somewhat decent depiction of the concept of journalism. Which yeah, is pretty cool. She even meets back up with the atrociously styled Ginger to keep following Clark's trail, and Clark and Lois finally reunite back on the Kent farm. We get yet another flashback of Cal and his parents, which is the funniest scene of the entire film. So I'm gonna see how many things are ridiculous right off the bat. A completely young-looking Clark and his parents, and his dog, are driving through a storm that is breeding a tornado that they didn't see until they drove into it. Nor were they warned by a semi-competent meteorologist. The family somehow forgets their dog and and this is the funny part, people clown on the fact that Clark's father didn't let Clark save him because the world isn't ready for Superman. But like I've said plenty of times, I can't say that's stupid, because the comics have nothing to do with this. So instead, I find it even funnier that Pa Kent actually stops his invincible son from going to retrieve the dog. That is miles less intelligent, and if he just let Clark get the damn dog, it would have prevented Clark from having to save him at all. So no, I don't feel literally anything when this guy dies, because he chose to. But none of that matters now, because an hour into the film, the main villain is reintroduced. Someone that Cal doesn't know killed his dad. Cal doesn't even know him at all. And he shows up to threaten that the planet gives up Clark immediately or they'll kill everyone. Zod and company decrypt potentially every major language on the planet, sending a spooky message that, like, there's no way they have the power to project on every screen in the world and can't make it look any better than this. And I don't know where else to say this in this video, but I think I have to. Ma Kent's kind of a baddie. Now at this point, the government is scared, so they immediately kidnap Lois Lane because she's rumored to know where Clark is. I'm not even sure why she tries to run, like, ma'am, you're not getting away from the feds without a disguise, in heels, on foot. And then Clark shows up to some random chapel to not only bash the Jesus metaphor even further, but to give us yet another flashback. I don't have a problem with superheroes getting bullied in countless flashbacks, it's just the frequency with which Clark is bullied by so many different people that comes off really weird. Like, why is this group like 15 kids? And honestly, as an invincible super being, I'm not mad that Clark doesn't fight back, but I feel that a big part of bullying is that it's pretty painful. And here, Clark's essentially surrounded by, like, marshmallow people. Like, you're fine. And honestly, I'm not saying I'd bully Clark, but it is the most pretentious thing in the world to see this kid studying Plato. They just threw in a random philosopher to make Clark seem sophisticated. Although I do like that the redhead is shown to be, like, an empathetic human being here. That's kind of nice, unlike anyone else in this movie. So the priest at the chapel, or pastor or whatever, convinces Clark to give humanity a chance to be better than he assumes by taking a leap of faith. And he surrenders, making sure to talk to Lois first. And we get another gray, dry scene of these two interacting, teasing his name for the first time in the film. Then Cal is surrendered to Zod, and we finally get into the interactions between the protagonist and the antagonist of the film, after the halfway point. Zod demands that both Cal and Lois come aboard his ship. Now, from a plot perspective, if Superman's going to be nailed to a table, then Lois is going to have to be there to set things in motion for him to escape. That makes sense. But the film never actually clarifies why Zod wanted Lois in the first place, nor does it clarify whether Cal's weird dream sequence thing with Zod was real. Like, the movie acts like it was real without saying how the hell it was even possible. The technical prowess of the Kryptonians in this movie is direly underexplained. So, when Cal and Lois escape with the help of Jor-El, they land back near Ma Kent's farm where she's being interrogated by Zod and company. This is where we get into the real action of the movie, and probably the last decent part, because Clark's pretty unhappy that Zod's trying to rizz up his mother. Now, while Clark's tussle with the Kryptonians inevitably kills countless people, he does still try as hard as he can to save the innocent. And also, why does this fuck-ass redhead keep showing up? You know, I actually think it's funny that the female Kryptonian, whose name I can never remember, says out loud that none of them have a sense of morality. Which is good. Like, the enemy Kryptonians I can kind of get behind. One, because Michael Shannon does a really good job with Zod, but also because they all have a type of lunacy that you can only see in villains like this. They want to kill everyone and they don't feel bad about it, great. And the fight scenes these Kryptonians are in are actually good. Again, aside from all of the death, I know I can't complain about comic accuracy, the choreography and CGI in this movie is a huge positive. The way that these people move, so alien, so controlled, so vicious all at once, it's pretty good. But then the enemies retreat, so that was pointless and got people killed. So with this, the third act is kicked off. The Kryptonians start up a terraforming machine called a world engine. These things are lovely because they don't make a lick of sense. If the Kryptonians have a world engine, they should absolutely be able to prevent Krypton from exploding, or at least get to another planet close enough to seek refuge. Anyway, now the goal is for Superman to stop Zod and Kryptonians and disable the world engine. Which is lovely, like I said. Now, while this entire conflict should 100% kill billions of people no matter how you look at it, the world engine is kind of the MacGuffin, and while it kills a decent chunk of the Earth's population, the real fight is between Clark and Zod. So when Clark and Lois finally kiss, cementing their place as this movie's most boring relationship between two characters, Clark and Zod's final fight begins. And again, all the world engine and Lois Lane stuff is really stupid and boring. But Zod's charisma actually makes me interested in watching his character. So this fight, even though a few thousand more people end up dying, is actually more engaging to watch because I enjoy the ideals clashing here. But still, no good thing lasts, and the fight ends with Superman, a man wearing the symbol for hope on his chest, internally decapitating Zod. Hey buddy, If you moved Zod's head in any other direction, he would have lived, and everyone else that he was threatening also would have lived. But you chose to rotate it, so good job. Now the only interesting part of the movie, along with an eighth of the Earth's population, is dead. And that's it. Superman destroys a man's spine through his head, tells the government not to track him after this war crime, and then we get another flashback. Clark becomes a reporter, and then the movie's over. So, this movie's bad. The first half is a dull gray slog with too many flashbacks, while the latter half is a duller, grayer, action-packed ethnic cleansing, where Superman is thrown through more people than he actively saves. The Jesus metaphors are cool in theory but underbaked, even though time after time the symbolism is shoved down your throat, and Lois Lane actually might be the biggest problem. Superman and Lois just have zero chemistry. The only time they spend together drives the plot forward rather than filling out their characters. And it doesn't help that while Lois is annoying, stubborn, and kinda rude, Superman just doesn't have any character traits other than loving his mom, which, if you want to say that counts, I won't stop you. And yeah, there you have it. Man of Steel failed because it immediately drops you headfirst into a dull, gray world filled with characters that you don't want to root for and people you don't care about. It's over 2 hours long and says a lot of nothing, killing a decent percentage of the Earth's population and using Jesus metaphors like it was made by a pastor. But before I end this video, I still want to say that I am a resident fan of the Zack Snyder cut of Justice League. And I want to say that before I say that I believe that Zack Snyder might have been the absolute worst choice for these movies other than Joss Whedon. This guy is so edgy, annoying, and childish that his first instinct was to try to make it so that Batman and Superman kill people when he was explicitly told he wasn't allowed to. I know I'm not supposed to mention the comics right now, but that's the problem with the whole Snyderverse and why I'm glad it's 6 feet under. Zack Snyder is a child who chose the DC toy box and didn't like the toys as they were, so he wanted to change things for no reason. And again, even if that's incredibly annoying and childish, it's fine in a vacuum. But the movies actually have to be good or people are going to get upset. And as I've just sat here and proved, Man of Steel, the very first one, wasn't good. So for the 5 people that are still glazing Man of Steel, I'm glad that you found a way to appreciate art that I don't. I think that's beautiful. But it doesn't change the fact that this new Superman movie is both better and more faithful to the comics while not looking like a metaphorical abortion. And for those of you who just want Henry Cavill back because he's hot or Moggs or whatever, I'm gonna say to you what should have been said to Snyder when he said he wanted Batman to kill people and get raped in prison. You need to grow up. Henry Cavill is a lovely guy and he could have made a great Superman if he got a real chance. But he didn't. I'm sorry, I wish that wasn't the case, but he didn't. And if his chemistry with Lois and Man of Steel is any indication, if we're being honest, I don't really care that somebody new is taking a crack at this universe. Because Man of Steel is forever going to be the film that everyone looks at in disgust compared to every other piece of Superman media. You want to talk about Injustice or The Boys or Invincible tarnishing Superman's reputation? No, it's this movie. This 3 out of 10 pile of dog duke that uses beautiful music and special effects to trick people into believing it's better than it is. Rest in piss, Man of Steel. Sorry it got a little heated towards the end there. I don't always rant about things I don't like. If you enjoy talking about movies, TV shows, video games, and superheroes and stuff, you should subscribe. Seriously, you subscribe to channels worse than this one, and it's what I would do if I were you. Or not, that's fine. Play nice, people.